Dear students, I welcome you to this lecture series on Indian politics, and my today's topic for discussion is Nature of Indian State, the Liberal Perspective. The main objectives of this lecture are to examine the concept of state and various elements of a state, to understand liberalism briefly and liberal perspective on the state in detail, and also to understand the nature of Indian state from a liberal perspective. Dear students, before going into the details of the nature of Indian state from a liberal perspective, it is a prerequisite to have some broader impression of the term state and liberalism so that it will later on help you to have a much clearer understanding of the liberal perspective of nature of Indian state. So let's start with the term state first. Making sense of what the concept of state is. The concept of state has figured as the central theme of traditional political theory since the earliest. One can gauge the centrality of state if one looks at how the discipline of political science has come to be defined as the science of the state, as well as that political science begins and ends with state. In modern political theory, the significance of the concept of the state has been fluctuating. It is significant that though some sort of political organizations have existed since ancient times, such as the Greek city-states and the Roman Empire, yet the concept of the state as such is comparatively modern. In modern times, Machiavelli's idea that the state is the power which has authority over man was an important idea because it describes the nature of the state, not the end of the state. Similarly, for Max Weber, a famous German sociologist, a state is a human community that successfully claims the monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory. The Greeks used the term polis or city to express their concept of the state. The state was in fact a city-state, and the term was the true enough. But the development of the country state, as Sidgwick calls it, demands a more comprehensive term. The Romans used civitas, but they spoke also of status republica or res publica, which carried with it the idea of the public welfare. The modern term state probably derived from status through the adoption of the term by Teutonic peoples. Machiavelli is credited with introducing the term into modern political science, and during the 16th and 17th centuries, the term found its way in different forms into the languages of the modern Europe. To be very clear, the state is distinguished from all other associations by its exclusive investment with the final power of coercion. It embraces the whole of people in a specific territory, and it has the special function of maintaining social order. Men who live together in small groups under fairly primitive conditions of life may manage without any institution that it is appropriate to call a state. But as soon as human societies get beyond this stage, the state emerges as an apparently necessary instrument for holding them together. There were city-states in ancient Greece and medieval Italy and Germany. The ancient empires of Egypt, Persia and Babylon were based on states as much as the British Empire has been. There have been states at every stage of civilization except the most rudimentary. In the light of this conceptual part of state, it's customary to identify the state by its constituent elements. Now, let's discuss the elements of the state. However, if one looks closely at the conceptual part as I have discussed so far, one gets the impression that in order to qualify of being a state, it must possess four important elements. First, population, then territory, government and sovereignty. Let's start with population first. Being essentially a human institution, the state therefore must possess population, which forms an essential element of it. However, the population can constitute a state only when it is united by the condition of interdependence, consciousness of common interest, and general regard for a set of common rules of behavior and institutions. The size of population does not matter, and in that there is no fixed count. However, it mostly depends upon the self-sufficiency of that population. Now let's discuss the second element as territory. Territory forms an essential element of a state. The state therefore must possess a territory to exercise its authority without any dispute or challenge. The territory of a state includes the land, water, and air space within its boundary. It also extends usually to a distance of 3 miles into the sea from its coast and is known as territorial waters, which may be sought to be extended further in the times of war. Like population, its size cannot be fixed because it is usually a geographical phenomenon. Now, the third element of state, government. It also is an essential element insofar as the authority of state is exercised by the government. Functions of the state are performed by the government. Laws of the state are made, declared, and enforced by the government. Justice is dispensed by the judicial wing of the government. In short, if state is an abstract concept, government is its concrete form. Now, the fourth element is sovereignty. Sovereignty is that element of a state which distinguishes it from other organizations, which can possess a territory, has a population, and even an informal management of affairs too. But only a state can claim this element. Sovereignty denotes the supreme or ultimate power of the state to make laws or to take political decisions, establishing public goals, fixing priorities, and resolving conflicts, as also enforcing such laws and decisions by the use of legitimate force. In fact, sovereignty denotes the final authority of the state over its population and its territory. Thus, a state is an association of people that establishes sovereign power within a defined territorial area, usually possessing a monopoly of power over that particular territory. Now, we are in a position to have some basic sense about the notion of state and its place in the discipline of political science as well as its core constituent elements. Let's now turn to liberalism for a while. Dear students, the term liberal has been in use since the 14th century, but it has had a wide variety of meanings. The Latin word liber referred to a class of free men. In other words, men who were neither serfs nor slaves, or more often it also came to be associated increasingly with the ideas of freedom and choice. However, the term liberalism to denote a political allegiance made its appearance much later. It was not used until the early part of the 19th century. It was being first employed in Spain in 1812. Whatever liberalism later would become the most powerful political ideology, and it was particularly a product of the breakdown of feudalism in Europe and the growth of market or capitalist society in its place. The central theme of liberal ideology is its commitment to the individual and the desire to construct a society in which people can satisfy their interests and achieve fulfillment. Liberals believe that human beings are first and foremost individuals endowed with reason. This implies that each individual should enjoy the maximum possible freedom consistent with a like freedom for all. However, although individuals are entitled to equal legal and political rights, they should be rewarded in line with their talents and their willingness to work. Liberal societies are organized politically around the twin principles of constitutionalism and consent, designed to protect citizens from the danger of government and tyranny. One thing must be mentioned briefly here, that liberalism as an ideology is generally famous for its classical and modern variants. The classical liberalism is characterized by a belief in a minimal state whose functions are limited to the maintenance of domestic order and personal security. Modern liberalism, on the other hand, accepts that the state should help people to help themselves. Now, how such a perspective does interpret a state, and as such helps us in understanding the nature of state. Now, let's come to the liberal perspective on state. To start with, the first and most important liberal assumption regarding state is that the state is not superior to other institutions. The state is simply one social institution amongst many. Each has its proper sphere. The state too has its proper sphere. It should not appropriate the spheres of other institutions. This might be described as a rule of internal management, a presumption that each institution is the appropriate authority for the management of those matters which pertain to it. For liberals, the state ought to respect the fault principle. The state must not to punish or impose any detriment upon any man except on the basis of his fault. The state ought not to recompense those who are responsible for their blameworthiness. Additionally, the state must adhere to the principle of sovereignty of law and to the established proper procedures. The power of the state ought to be split and distributed amongst many centers. This principle is founded on the observation expressed in Lord Acton's dictum that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It is by minimizing the concentration of power in any one center and by setting up many alternative counterbalancing centers of power that the standard of everything open and above board is more nearly attained and opportunities for corruption are minimized. The positive liberal theory of the state emerged from the problem of the protection of liberty. Liberalism avoids the absolute state, confirming the superior value of individual liberty, but it also recognizes the dangers of chaos in the context of a human race which is polluted with evil. Liberalism confirms moral values and opposes relativism. It does not capitulate to the false doctrine of moral neutrality. Therefore, a liberal state signifies a limited government or limited state. It can also be called a theory of limited state presented by a number of philosophers. The term limited state may be confusing. It exactly means limited functions and role of the state or non-intervention of state. The liberal state is contradictory to conservative, authoritarian and totalitarian state. The meaning of liberal is respectful and accepting of behavior or opinions different from others. A state is liberal when it recognizes the opinions, attitudes and behavior of individuals and does not think these as a hazard to the existence and administration of state. As discussed that there are different variants of liberalism means there also are differences among the political theories regarding the functions of liberal state. But there is a common element among them all, that individuals must have maximum liberty so that their free development does not receive any hindrance due to state policy or action. So, what impression can we get while analyzing the nature of Indian state from a liberal perspective as discussed so far? It's now turn to discuss the nature of Indian state from a liberal perspective. In India, being known as a leading third world developing country, the political stability was initially generated by the one-party dominant system, and the constitution provides for a liberal political democracy. The state came to be a strong source of power, leading to the process of socio-economic reconstruction and development through organized state-controlled planning as well as by developing a mixed economic system. Whether it is state building, nation building, democracy building, or socio-economic building and government building, all are undertaken by the state and its democratically elected government. The involvement of political parties, pressure groups, as well as institutions of local self-government has been secured to some extent. While officially the Indian state is described as a sovereign, socialist, secular and democratic republic, it in reality is working as a neo-capitalist, neo-socialist, secular democratic republic. At the very outset, the public sector was given more importance and was assigned a bigger role in the development process. Nevertheless, the private sector was also given an opportunity to develop. A regulatory regime was, however, built for preventing the concentration of wealth into fewer hands as well as for securing socialistic equality. When the public sector failed to grow and deliver the desired goods and services, the private sector was given a chance to develop and brakes were applied upon the public sector. The change was initiated in 1991 and it got popular characterization as liberalization and deregulation of Indian economy and industry. Since that time, the role of the Indian state has been getting transformed into the role of coordinator in place of an owner. The state in India is now acting as an instrument for transforming Indian economy on the basis of the principles of liberalization, privatization and globalization, for which the traditional name happens to be capitalism. From a liberal perspective, Indian state is promoting equality and is also securing social justice. It's also eradicating poverty by focusing on socio-economic development and as such is protecting the interests of the minorities and the weaker sections of the society, particularly the interests of the people belonging to the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes and other backward classes. However, for securing these, the Indian state has been exercising institutionalized power. Several liberal theories, therefore, concentrate upon the study of political institutions and processes for understanding the nature and character of Indian state. W.H. Morris Jones and Rajni Kothari have been the two outstanding followers and in fact the makers of this perspective. For Rajni Kothari, the success of Indian democratic setup has much to do with the existence of pluralistic tolerance and a culture of consensus, one of the major pillars of a liberal perspective. Similarly, Gunnar Myrdal and Robert Hartgrave also followed this perspective. For Gunnar Myrdal, the Indian state is a soft state lacking the capacity to act against the vested interests. The term soft state signified the limits of public power, that is, the state's inability to enforce public policies to eradicate poverty or to enforce its own laws. However, for Hartgrave, it is a weak state. All this brings us to the point that India is one which stands for the preservation of the entire stuff of a liberal democratic state. The Constitution facilitates for adult franchise, periodic elections, representative and responsible government, independent functionary, rule of law and separation of powers. The limited government and competitive party system are cardinal features of the Indian model of state. To quote Rajni Kothari, while economic and social change is in important respects planned and directed from above, it's nonetheless carried on within the framework of an open and undirected polity. However, some of the recent scholars of Indian politics adopt a paradigm which involves features of both Marxist and liberal approaches. They adopt a political economy perspective for studying the nature of the Indian state and politics. The most prominent followers of this line of thinking involve Atul Kohli, Francis Frankl, Rudolf Senerdorf. Their works give an interesting as well as useful account of complex interactions among different parts of the polity and state regime and party system, all of which determine the scope and direction of state policy in India. With this, dear students, I conclude today's lecture. Hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.